I think it's always a burdensome time in this world. You know, we were talking about there's nothing new under the sun this morning in Sunday school, and they weren't thinking about nuclear war or whatever it is, maybe, but they were thinking about serious stuff. And as Dick seemed to, we talked about Ecclesiastes, and it's an existential sort of theory. It's philosophy, existential philosophy, and I always probably why I do what I do. I'm kind of rooted and seated in existential philosophy, and I think John is too. We always are asking the questions: what's up? And how do we feel, and how do we live in these times? And I think as to these songs and what John is leading us towards, I think is right, which is you either pay a lot of attention to it and let it do whatever it does and let it take the effect that it has, or you choose to consider another narrative that goes beyond that narrative, that is higher and broader and larger, and we are a part of a narrative that's the highest narrative, and God in charge, and a sovereign God who is in charge of human history. And we believe in a book that's rooted in real human history, which I think is part of what validates it. It's not just something that somebody thought of, but actually doesn't really hold back the punches. It's all the ugly stuff is in here too. It's included. And so you get a sense that you're being told the truth in this book, and that we've been given the principles to absorb and to deal with these the winds blowing this way and that way, in the issues of change and all of the turbulence that we're facing these days. I think it's important to note. I assume that people know this, but I don't. I think that's a wrong assumption. We are also in a massive change, and we have been. It's hard to think about this kind of stuff, and you don't have to believe me, but everything I read and was told to read and made to read, and all my understanding of history that people have given me, people that are smarter than me, conferences I went to, church leaders I've listened to, they all agree that that there are these massive changes in history. And every 500 years or so, in fact, and the Great Schism, and like the split, those splits in the East and West, and Protestant and Catholic, and then and every 500 years or so, and we're somewhere in the middle of another one of these sort of seams in history, and those things go alongside technological advances. The Protestant Reformations, the last one is 500 years back, and it had to do with the printing press, and it had to do with information and how it's distributed, and that people could read, and that information could be that it could be preserved in books, and it could be replicated, and lots of people could go through ideas and deal with ideas differently. It changed the world, okay, and it allowed for Protestant thrust moved with the printing press and the Bible, and people being able to read the Bible for themselves, and it changed the gospel. It changed the way that people, the world saw that and how it worked. And with everybody reading the Bible for themselves instead of the Pope telling them what to believe and everything, it changed how things went. And our country is based on that pluralism and people having the freedom to choose to believe what they want to. And there's a lot of latitude in the scriptures to believe a lot of different things, but to stay in the same overarching theme. And we're in the middle of that, and that's a confusing thing. Just like it was confusing, a long time ago they thought that that the church was the authority and that the Catholic Church was the only thing, and there's this alternative. And people had that was confusing. It's like, do we go with what thousands of years of tradition, or do we break that and we trust ourselves and our and independent reading and independent thinking, and so that was in society, and the mores and the fabric of society broke. It changed because all of the things that were just settled were brought into question, and you just have these sort of things happening all the time. This thing called Christendom. You maybe heard of Christendom. It's this idea. It's the church being in charge. Okay. The church wasn't always in charge. I'm talking about Christians, the church, Rome, the church, power, the Catholic Church, didn't always have power. Like Jesus was not that special in Palestine. Like He had couple hundred followers, nothing special, just a Jewish guy. He died at 33, pretty young, whatever. Life went on like it did for a while in Jerusalem. I mean, it didn't seem like anything crazy, but it had this effect, but it was a very underground effect. And there were like catacombs and stuff and everything. It's persecution. And the early church did everything. But then Constantine, who was in charge, saw this white cross in the sky, and he believed that God was speaking to him, saying that this is the truth. So he makes Christianity the world religion overnight. So just imagine, the mayor or the governor or the president or whoever is politically minded saying, hey, you guys are really important all of a sudden. Like, we're going to put you at the front of the line. Everybody needs to, what you guys say is important. So Christianity becomes really popular. And it takes on all this money and fame. It becomes everybody's religion in Rome, and it takes on the whole world, Well, that's been breaking down. That like centuries that went on, churches in charge. And if you want to exegete any town, go and look at the biggest buildings. That'll give you the value system of that town. It's always government buildings and church buildings, at least in the South. Okay, that's what we believed once upon a time. The church was that is what the big first churches in all these little towns represent. It's Christendom. That means Christian people in power. That is the silent majority, the red right, or whatever you'd call it in today's, in the United States political climate. But that is what this is. And we enjoyed this power. We've enjoyed being the popular people. We've enjoyed having deep pockets for a long time. And people have had to believe we've done what we've wanted as Christians, and with little accountability, to the point that we don't have a good reputation, okay? Well, that's been breaking down for as long as I've been alive. As long as most of you guys have been alive. Since the 50s, it's been breaking down. We're not a Christian society. We don't believe in the same values. Christians don't hold the clout that they did. We don't hold. I would have said once upon a time, you wouldn't have gotten elected to office in this town if you weren't a Christian. But maybe nowadays you can't get elected to office if you are a Christian. So those things have switched, okay? And all that stuff is just like your regular everyday world, your worldview, how you see the world kind of getting ripped up and getting torn apart. And that's been happening to us, most of us in the world, as long as we've been alive. That's why we're looking at the waning influence we have in culture. Like, man, what's wrong? Christians, we're losing our influence. And it's like I have all this infighting and stuff. It's because we're in this thing, we're going down. Like, we're on the losing ship now, okay? We used to be on the winning ship. We used to be the New York Yankees. You know what I mean? Like, we had the money. We had the popularity. Now we're the Kansas City Royals. Or we're the Oakland Athletics. Like, we're just treading water to hang out with the people, and really people don't even want us in the league. So that is where we are. I also talked about these massive things that have taken place. This isn't all our fault. This really has little to do with us as a church or us as individuals, but it is the larger, it's this larger currents that are happening. Another one is we have seen massive technological advances. I was reflected on my grandmother's 99 years of her life. Once upon a time, they walked everywhere they went. She's seen all these airplanes and space shuttles. She's seen all this stuff. Well, we're not really affected by people landing on the moon and stuff. That's just a little bit far for us. But what has changed in the fabric of our society in our lifetimes in the last 20 years? I mean, these are massive things, okay? The internet, high-speed internet, your cellular phone being a supercomputer, like a little computer in your pocket. The Tandy 1000 that my dad bought when I was 8 years old, your phone is so much faster than that big old computer. It was like this big. It was like the size. It was huge. It was like awesome and big. It took up the whole kitchen table, and it doesn't even it didn't have as much RAM as like your text messages and stuff required to be sent back and forth. Like, it's just changed. Insane. I remember I was 14 when I went over to my friend's house and they had the internet, and I was like, "What is this?" The internet. It was AOL. Did all the stuff. I'd get really excited when I'd hear that sound. And then I got AOL Instant Messenger, and I could talk to people. It was the craziest thing ever because we didn't have text message. We didn't have phones. I didn't know what cell phones were. I got a cell phone. I was 20 years old. I was already in college, and they finally did a good enough deal. And man, do you remember this from another life? Man, I wouldn't use it during the day. Like it had to be after 8, before 8 in the morning or after 8 at night, and then we would be talking. But that's it. Like don't call during the day because we couldn't go over your minutes. We used to do all this stuff, but look, there is the same amount of cell phones as there are people in the world now. Roughly the same in the billions, to a couple of 100,000. So it is almost required as a human existence. It wasn't even a thing. Okay. Then you have social media. And you have, these computers in your pocket. Those are revolutions all by themselves. When they did the radio or something, it took a long time to go where everybody got the radio. There were early adopters, and you can look at these successions of how technology kind of finds its way into mainstream society. But that time requirement has become less and less now. So now we're changing, and culture is changing every, I think, 6 months, 8 months, 1 year. We can't even keep up with it. The only way to keep up with it is to always be moving forward. There is nothing that stays long enough. You know what I mean? Windows operating system, you're going to have to update it. You have to relearn the new one. All my boomer friends get mad at updating in your operating system. Like, just let me have my Windows 2000. I don't want to get any new programs. You have to learn the new operating system. And so we're just going to have this normal thing that is turbulent. Normal thing is turbulent. Normal thing, we are in a little bit of a turbulent time. And now the normal thing is just to pivot with those changes and just to try to find something that you can hold on to while it all spins around. And so I don't know. I guess I'm just bringing that up because I understand, and maybe it helps us to understand that this is the world we're swimming in. And if you look around at why people aren't paying attention to the Christian message or why the church seems to be failing in local communities, why other ideas and worldviews are becoming more and more popular. It's all these things that are happening at the same time, and we just happen to be in the middle of it. And to me, what we should decide, what gives me strength, is to decide that I was supposed to be born in the middle of it. I say this a lot. My wife likes to say she's a little old-fashioned. She likes I Love Lucy. Whenever she has insomnia, she watches just reruns of I Love Lucy, and she likes Bewitched, and she likes she likes all these old shows. I guess it's just like homey for her and brings her back to this place where everything was safer or something. Anyway, even Bewitched, it's all witchcraft, right? It's like the sweetest show ever. Anyway, but she does that, and she's like, I just feel like I was born in the wrong time. You ever feel that way? Like you just wish you weren't born in that time? No, that's the wrong thing. We're born in this time. And this is an exciting time to be alive. And knowing what you know now and knowing all the stuff, you can't go back. Look, we're not Bill and Ted. We can't go back and go hang out, 50 years ago because it's safer, And even if we think, we know more and it would take everything we know back, no, you can't even do that. I was listening to this comedian the other day, and he was saying, man, he's like, knowing what I know now, if I went back in time, I don't think it would work. It wouldn't change anything. Have y'all seen that? He's like, it wouldn't change anything because he's like, I would see somebody messing with a phone, and I would say, hey, man, in the future, we have those. You don't have to have a cord or anything. It's just you walk around and you put it in your pocket, and they'll be like, how does that work? And he'd be like, oh, well, I don't know how it works, So we don't know how it works, so we really couldn't help. We couldn't affect going back in time. But sorry, it's a lot funnier when he says it. But yeah, it's the wrong thing to decide that you should be born another time. It's the wrong thing to just be mad at the events and how they're working their way out. God gave us this time. God let us and our histories be a part of this time. And just like he let Martin Luther and all them swim around in all that confusion in the 1600s. You know what I mean? Just like he let some people swim around in all the confusion of Genghis Khan and his reign, or Alexander the Great and his tyranny, like his destructive, sort of path. I mean, human beings. I think about the young people. You watch war movies and stuff, and I listen to this guy. He's like just thinking about in World War II when he's just looking at a bunch of 18-year-olds that are going to die that day, and he's like, God, it's just a waste. They're all going to die that day. What are those 18-year-olds worse off? Like, they just got born into that time. You look at somebody in Afghanistan, they got born into that place. And so if you're feeling bad about yourself, consider that we only make 6% of the world's population in the United States, and we take up half of this resource. That like, as the United States, we're rich. So even if you're born into a hard time, being born in the United States, you're actually doing quite well. And to be born in this time might be the most exciting time in all of human history, or at least one of them. I mean, go back on your timeline, your history book, and go think of other times that would have been more exciting. Where you want to be like Billy the Kid in that Wild Wild West and shoot each other? I don't think that was quite as romantic as it seems like. Or do you want to be Victorian England, and you want to help try to get people to decide that slavery is bad? That would have been some of the times that people lived in. Or you want to be like, living over in, I don't know, like you could pick history and pick other times, but they were all hard. And none of them were easy, and they all had the stuff that they had to deal with in that day. And so we have to deal with the stuff in these days. And yes, it is complicated, and yes, it is confusing. It just might help you to know that it is complicated and confusing for everybody. It is the time, it's the timeline, it's the events that are big wheels that are spinning that none of us have that much control over. And when you realize that, and when you stop that, then you realize it's not all my fault. It's not all my problem. It's not you for not being organized, or you for not being disciplined enough. It's not, none of us are ready to keep up with the 21st century modern man, because we don't even know what it is. And every day we're just getting more reports about the way that the modern society is absolutely killing us. So we know this is not even sustainable. It's not going to work. We know better. But this is what we have to do. We have to work this stuff out. Let me just read the scripture and give you guys 10 minutes of the Bible and we'll be done. Today I want to read out of Mark. Mark's one of my favorite books. This is a beautiful story about blind Bartimaeus. I think it's one of the ones that we grow up hearing from as a little kid, and they're special to us, but they seem a little far off to us because we never see this stuff happening at church. But I think that there's some things that we can get from. And sorry, but we're going to have to send this computer home to Laura because they will not let us validate our pro presenter with pastor. Even though we paid that gummit. The man's always out for us, isn't it? Just kidding. All right. So it says, then they came to Jericho. As Jesus and his disciples were together with this very large crowd. He's very popular. Wasn't always, but at this point, they're popular. They're leaving the city, and a blind man, Bartimaeus, which they knew the name, and they knew his dad. This is somebody that people knew, was sitting by the roadside. Wasn't just a random, but a person, and he was sitting by the roadside begging. Did anybody ever like beggars? The answer is no. Okay. Even your aunt and uncle, any of them. Like, I don't, you know what I mean? Nobody likes a beggar. These guys are all like, shut up, dude. Leave us alone. You're ruining the mood. You're ruining the moment. We're going to call the cops. We're getting you out of here. This is obnoxious. You know what I mean? It's just messing up the game. It's messing up the regular norm. And so when he hears that Jesus of Nazareth, he starts to say, Jesus, son of David. Now, that's an elevated term. Jesus of Nazareth just means both from Tupelo. But Jesus, son of David means like your honor. It means like esteemed, like you're the chosen one, like you're Messiah. The reader would understand that he is showing faith here. He's like, don't just think you're Jesus from Nazareth. I think you're son of David. I think you're the real king. I think you're the real God. So he's displaying faith. He shouts, son of David, have mercy on me. Shut up, purpose. Many rebuked him. Now look, I'm going to tell y'all, even when I'm right, let about one or two of y'all rebuke me. Let Tyler tell me, but I think it was what she says, a bunch of nonsense. I might act like it doesn't bother me, but I'll go home with that. We don't like to go against the grain, okay? We'll let 10 people tell us we did good, but one person told us we did lousy. We'll think of that one person. When people start rebuking me, look, it has to be a small majority. 2 or 3 people want to eat tacos instead of pizza. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know y'all wanted tacos. I'm sorry. We just lose our rights real quick, So to be rebuked by a lot of people, man, I would shut my mouth. I would shut it down. This guy does it. He shouts all the more. He's not having it. Son of David, have mercy on me. But Jesus stops and says, call him. And so they called to the blind man. And all of a sudden, because Jesus looks on him and gives him a little bit of love, everybody else does it. Hey, man, dadgum. Look, well, it worked for you. So get up. He's calling you. Get up. So he throws his cloak aside, he jumps to his feet, he comes to Jesus. What do you want me to do for you? Now, this ought to be obvious. He's blind, he's begging, he's yelling, he's causing a scene. It's obvious. But Jesus asked him a question, what do you want me to do for you? It's a great question. If Jesus, I just love to ask this, it's always such a just an important thing. But if Jesus asked you that today, what would you say? Just a blank check. What would you want? What do you want me to do for you? What do you want me to do for you? That's real stuff, you know. And he has to say something real crazy here. Because what would you have said if you'd have been blind? I would have been like, man, could you just hook me up with like some lunch, man? Dude, hey, man, like, hey, let me get 5 or 10, man. Like, just, I don't need a lot. Just my daily bread. You know, tell all these people to be nicer to me, you know. I don't have any place to sleep, you know, or maybe I could follow you. I don't have a lot of purpose. Let me join you and I'll help you. I mean, I would offer all kinds of things, but I would limp in with my request, man. I'm not going to be like, well, since you ask, you know. But he says, I want to sleep. Now, this is probably the only thing that people think he cannot give. But this guy owns it. He says, what I want to be able to see, this is his greatest need. And Jesus says, your faith's healed you. And he receives sight. And he follows Jesus along the road. That's the exchange. That's what you get. And I think in a core level, this is sort of the fundamental relationship with us and God, is that we are always in flux about what we deserve and don't deserve, and our real needs, and whether or not we can even own asking what we really need. I had a therapist tell me a long time ago that my life was pervaded by guilt, that guilt carries everything, that I feel bad about anything. And I think that was true. It was eye-opening for me, because you feel bad about asking for something that you need, or you feel bad about admitting a real need. And maybe it's a real need, but maybe it's just a real desire. Is it anything wrong with wanting things or desiring things just because they're good or just because they're lovely? I mean, he says whatever is true, whatever is lovely, admirable, and excellent, and praiseworthy, think about such things, desire such things. There's nothing wrong. There's no laws against these things. But then we get all mousy and scared if we want to admit that there's some desire for our heart or something that we want. And Jesus doesn't seem to be dealing with that at all. What do you need? What do you want? What are you after? I just think that Jesus can handle our requests. He can handle our desires. If anybody can handle them, he can handle them. In fact, I feel like most of the things that I would, if I'm honest and I could barely admit that I really wanted, I don't think I could tell any of you, but according to this, I could tell Jesus. And maybe he'll give those things to me, and maybe he won't. But I think that the thing that we can take here is that our desires and our needs, he knows what we need. He knows before we even ask them. And I think that we have to be like this guy. I think that his faith is the operative thing here, and it's the thing that's commended. He doesn't care what people think. And he doesn't care how it looks. And he doesn't care if it stirs something up. He believed in Christ, and he believed that Christ was even willing to help him, even willing to take him in his lowly circumstances and bless him and give him something good. One of the great scriptures, and I know it's a weird one, because it, you know, people misunderstand God when they think of him as a blank check giver, but Jesus says, which of you, if your son asks for bread, is going to give him a stone? Like, you wouldn't do that. So he's like, so I'm not going to do that. And so I do think there's an old song that says, Jesus on the main line, tell him what you want. And I believe that we are to go to God with our needs, our desires, even our wants. I remembered a man that was a high school teacher, one of my favorite high school teachers, and he told he had not married he married while I was in high school. And he said that he prayed for 10 or 20 years for the right woman, and he would draw pictures of her, and he had all of, like, who she was and everything, like, And that really did come to pass. And he's like, it was detailed in how it came to pass. And he would, at some point, it became a part of his testimony just to say that, like, I always wanted this in a woman, and this lady came to me. It was a gift. He just always attributed it to God because he asked for what he desired. And life is too short to go through without some good things being added. It's part of what makes it possible for us to continue to go forth. And there's a camp of Christianity that you deserve a gold Rolls Royce because you're chosen. And there's a camp of Christianity that says you can't even ask for anything because you're just a sinner saved by grace. And both of those polemics, I think, are out of the question here. We are sinners saved by grace. We do have need. We're animalistic in terms of our needs. We have all kinds of needs, and there's all kinds of stuff like that. But you are a person that God made, and millions of things did have to go right for you to be born, and you were born here in these circumstances today in order to give God glory and credit and to live a life of partnership with him. And so, yeah, if you're living a life in partnership with God, then that means that you need to be able to ask things of God and expect to get some returns on what you're given. And God seems to make that clear throughout the scripture. Now, does it happen the exact way we want to? Not necessarily. Jesus he healed other blind people. This is the best way, because he just says, go, you've made your face made you well. The other poor old guy that was blind, Jesus spit and made mud and rubbed it in his face. That wouldn't have been a cool way to get healed. You know what I mean? It's a totally different thing. You guys are serious today, man. That's supposed to be funny too. All right, but yeah, he just says, go and be made well. So yeah, I just think that, man, what side are we on? What are we believing about God that's not true? And these little stories like this, they grab the imagination of our children, but to us, we almost feel like they're fables and they're only for kids. And we don't believe that we could really pray these prayers and exercise this kind of faith today. And it seems to me that miracles do happen, but just rarely do people ask for them. And maybe let's try to be the people that ask God for big things. I used to be considered one of those people. And some of the big risks and some of the big things that I asked God for did happen. And I really do think it's just because I asked for it, and just because I believed God for those things. So let's stop there. Let me pray. We'll be done today. God, I just thank you for these great stories that you've given to us, and that they continue to speak to us. And God, we might need to look around and see where we're swimming, just to consider all the currents and all the situations that we're in, to look at look at all the stuff that's happening, but God, not to be afraid, but to take courage that you have allowed us to be at this place at this time. We're anointed to live our lives. And what a great truth, God. I am anointed to live my life, and each of these people is anointed to live their life. And I can't live their lives for them, and they can't live my life for me. We each have the grace to live the life you call us to. And God, you call us towards more grace. You call us towards more faith. You call us towards more love, more action, more truth. And God, these things have to be tested and tried. They have to be exercised in order to be developed. And so, God, teach us to pray. Teach us to ask you for the things that we need, to not be afraid. Lord, if we are pervaded by guilt and we carry around low self-esteem, if we carry around inferiority and feel like parts of the world are roped off to us, God, help us to see what that is and where that's coming from. Most of the things that you say in the New Testament are about abundance. They're about grace. They're about kingdom. They're about a good future. And so, God, we want to hold on to those things and continue to believe those things in the face of the empire, in the face of all sorts of things falling apart. So, Lord, help us today. Give us the strength, the New Testament courage and faith that we see there. We want to be your people today, in this world, in this time. And that's our prayer in Christ's name. Amen. Appreciate you guys, y'all. Got a little time to get on out of here. We'll see you guys soon. Peace and God bless.